3 years ago, I decided to escape the chaos of my everyday life and booked a cabin Airbnb deep in the woods, 4 hours away from home. It wasn't for any special occasion, just a quiet weekend to recharge. The cabin was secluded, with only a handful of other cabins nearby, surrounded by dense woods. This was exactly the kind of solitude I was seeking, and when I arrived early in the morning, I felt a rush of excitement. The cabin was rustic and charming, with large windows that offered views of towering trees. I spent the first few hours exploring the property, admiring the tranquil surroundings, and taking in the fresh air. By the afternoon, I sat on the back porch in a swinging chair, enjoying the serene landscape. It was there, looking out into the woods, that I saw him, a man walking alone through the tree. He was dressed casually, and didn't seem out of place, so I assumed he was staying at one of the nearby cabins. After a few minutes, he disappeared deeper into the forest, and I shrugged it off, returning to my quiet solitude. As evening approached, I went inside, cooked dinner and settled in to watch a movie. I was so absorbed in the film that the sudden sound of the doorbell caught me off guard. The cabin didn't seem to have a doorbell, but there it was again, more insistent this time. I got up, wondering if I had somehow missed someone earlier, and opened the door. To my surprise, man I had seen in the woods earlier stood on the porch, smiling unnervingly wide. His eyes seemed off, like something wasn't quite right about him. "Can I help you?" I asked, confused. "I've been lost for a few hours," he said in a calm voice. "I need help finding my cabin." I was taken aback, but nodded. "Sure, let me grab my phone so I can look up the address for you." I closed the door and walked over to the couch, picking up my phone, but when I returned to open the door again, he was gone, vanished into thin air. There was no sign of him anywhere on the porch or in the yard. My heart skipped a beat as I stood there, unsure of what had just happened. Had I imagined the whole thing? I locked the door and sat back down on the couch, trying to shake off the unsettling feeling. That night, I managed to fall asleep surprisingly well, but when I woke up the next morning, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The man was walking in the woods again, in the same spot he had been the day before. This time, I was sure he wasn't lost. He was deliberately walking the same path, over and over. I stepped outside to get some air, still trying to make sense of what had happened. That's when I heard it again. The doorbell. I froze, heart pounding. This wasn't a coincidence anymore. When I opened the door, the same man stood there, a wide smile plastered across his face. He repeated his story about being lost, just as he had the night before. My stomach twisted with a deep sense of dread. "You were here last night," I whispered, more to myself than to him. "Can you help me find my cabin?" he asked again, his voice eerily calm. I slammed the door shut, trembling. I called my friend, telling them everything, but it didn't make me feel any better. Just as I finished the call, the doorbell rang again. My hands shook as I checked the peephole, my pulse racing. He was standing outside, staring right at me. I packed up my things quickly, trying not to panic, but my mind was in a whirl. I peeked out the peephole one last time, just to make sure he was gone, before rushing to my car. As I pulled out of the driveway, I caught a glimpse of him, inside the cabin now, standing at the window, watching me leave. I drove away without looking back, my heart still racing. I contacted the Airbnb owner later, hoping for some explanation, but his response was short and dismissive. He apologized for my unpleasant stay, but offered no real concern or answers. Even now, years later, I can't shake the image of that man standing at the window, watching me drive away. I still don't know what he wanted, but I know one thing for sure: he wasn't lost. He was waiting, and I was the one who had walked right into his trap. I had been hiking alone in the Appalachian Mountains for years. Every autumn, I would tackle a new trail, seeking solitude and a break from the chaos of daily life. In 2019, I planned a week-long backpacking trip across the range to a small lake nestled at the top of the mountains. My best friend, who usually joined me, had to cancel last minute due to work, but with everything already set, I decided to go alone. The first 2 days were peaceful. I navigated through the rugged terrain, relying on maps and landmarks to guide me. The trail was unmarked and treacherous, but that was the allure. By nightfall on the second day, I set up camp far from the ridge, knowing I still had several hours of hiking ahead before reaching the lake. It was dark by the time I settled by my campfire. The crackling flames warmed me as I ate my dinner. The woods were silent, except for the distant sounds of the forest and the wind whistling through the trees. After a while, I retreated to my tent, planning to read for a bit before sleep. The fire continued to crackle outside as I laid down, the shadows in the trees growing longer in the fading light. Suddenly, the snap of a stick behind my tent startled me. My heart raced as I froze, listening. Could it be a bear, drawn by the smell of food? I cautiously crawled out of my tent, shining a flashlight into the darkened tree line. Nothing. I called out into the night, hoping to scare off whatever had made the noise, but there was no response. The silence was thick and unnerving. I stayed outside for a while, scanning the woods. Nothing else moved, and slowly, my nerves settled. Reluctantly, I returned to my tent and put out the fire, but sleep didn't come easily. Every creak of the trees and rustle of leaves had me on edge. The thought of a bear kept me up longer than I expected, but eventually exhaustion overtook me, and I drifted into an uneasy sleep. Morning came, and the woods seemed unchanged. The sun was barely rising, casting a soft light over the misty landscape. I packed up my camp quickly and continued my hike, eager to make it to the lake. The forest was eerily quiet as I hiked, the only sounds the crunch of my boots on the dirt trail and the occasional bird call. As I approached the ridge, something caught my eye. Far in the distance, along the same path I had walked the day before, I saw a figure. It was a man, walking slowly through the woods, his back turned toward me. He appeared to be on the same trail I had followed yesterday. I stopped dead in my tracks, my heart pounding in my chest. I stared at him, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It was the same man I had heard the night before, the one who had snapped that stick behind my tent. But how, why, was he following me? I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but it was clear now he wasn't lost. He was watching me. I tried to shake off the feeling, but the unease gnawed at me. I continued hiking, my pace quickening, my eyes flicking over my shoulder every few seconds. The man was still there, walking along the same trail, never looking back. Just as I reached the top of the ridge, my phone rang. It was a friend I had spoken to before the trip. I felt a slight sense of relief hearing a familiar voice, but that relief quickly vanished when I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. The doorbell. It was faint at first, like a soft ring on the wind, but there it was, unmistakable. The sound echoed through the woods. I froze. How was there a doorbell out here, so far from civilization? I whispered to my friend about what was happening, but just as I finished, the phone cut out. My heart skipped a beat. I stood there for a long moment, unsure of what to do next, but my instincts kicked in. I grabbed my stuff, hurrying to the car parked miles away. As I started to drive away, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw something that made my stomach churn. The man, standing in the window of my tent, staring at me as I left. My blood ran cold. I didn't know what his intentions were, but I didn't plan on sticking around to find out. Even now, I can't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Who was that man, and why had he been following me? Was he a hunter, or something more sinister? The unanswered questions still haunt me. It was a quiet evening, the kind where the world seemed to fade away as the storm rolled in. The wind howled outside, the trees bending under the weight of the rain that battered the windows. The house shook with every gust and the walls creaked as if they were groaning with the pressure. I was alone for the night, my roommate having left for the week. I had no plans, just the comforting hum of the storm and a video game to keep me company. As the hours passed, the storm grew worse, turning the night into a dark, deafening roar of rain and wind. Around 11 p.m., I was lost in my game when a sudden, unexpected sound broke my concentration. The doorbell rang. It was strange. I hadn't heard anyone approach the house, especially with the wind so intense. My first thought was that it was the wind itself, causing the bell to chime on its own, but curiosity gnawed at me. I got up from the couch and moved toward the door, peering through the peephole. Nothing. I opened the door, squinting into the torrential rain, expecting to see maybe a delivery person or some neighbor in need of help, but the porch was empty. I stood there for a moment, wondering if I'd imagined the bell. I was about to shut the door when a crash from the backyard stopped me in my tracks. Something had fallen over. A loud bang, followed by the sound of debris tumbling across the yard, filled the air. I rushed to the back door, throwing it open to find the patio furniture scattered everywhere. The wind was vicious, knocking everything around. I quickly grabbed the pieces and shoved them against the house, the storm stinging my skin like tiny needles. As I pushed the last chair back into place, I noticed someone standing at the edge of the backyard. My breath caught in my throat. There in the shadows was a figure, just standing still watching me. The person's face was hidden by the rain, but the shape was unmistakable. I froze for a moment, unsure of what to do. Then, instinct kicked in. I bolted inside, slamming the door behind me. I locked it, my heart pounding in my chest. I glanced out the window, but the figure was gone. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease. As I sat back down, I told myself it was probably someone from the neighborhood, just caught out in the storm. But I couldn't deny the gnawing fear in the pit of my stomach. I decided to call it a night, wrapping myself in a blanket on the couch. The storm continued to rage, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. My mind raced with possibilities. Had I just imagined a figure in the backyard? But the footsteps I'd heard on the wet grass were too real, too clear. I must have dozed off because, what felt like hours later, I was suddenly woken by a cold, wet sensation on my feet. Confused, I blinked in the dim light, only to see puddles of water on the floor. A series of muddy shoe prints trailed across the room, leading toward the back door. My heart stopped. There was no way this was happening. I quickly grabbed my phone, my hands trembling as I dialed 911. My pulse raced, and I held my breath, praying the intruder wasn't still in the house. Every creak of the house made me. The only sound I could hear was the storm outside, and the steady rhythm of my heartbeat. I stayed as still as possible, barely daring to breathe, when I suddenly heard something. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, and far too close. They were coming up the stairs. I ran into the corner of the room, my back pressed against the wall, and waited, every nerve in my body on fire. The footsteps stopped. I held my breath, listening for any movement, but there was nothing, just the sound of the storm outside. The police arrived soon after, but by the time they searched the house, there was no sign of the intruder. No one had broken in, no sign of forced entry, but I knew what I had heard. I knew what I had felt. To this day, I still wonder who had been watching me that night, and what their intentions were.